We're a long ways from the Grove at Ole Miss, Senator,
We are, yeah.
where we've crossed paths a few times over the years, but it's a treat to have you here on stage. Welcome to Munich. You just flew from D.C. last night, I assume?
Yes, just got in about 6 this morning.
Well, we're glad to
So I'm
have
alert and sharp.
I could tell,
Yeah.
as was always the case. You're wearing your Ukraine flag pin.
Thanks for noticing, yes.
Something that I was struck by, and folks in the room should know this too. I have a vivid memory of last summer's GOP convention in Milwaukee, seeing Senator Wicker wearing the same lapel pin at the GOP convention. So you are not a sunshine soldier, and you aren't just wearing that here where it's fashionable at Munich. You wear that everywhere.
That's right. And occasionally a child will stop me and compliment me on the flag, and I take it off and give it to them.
So you have a store them to replace the ones.
Well, it's pretty easy in Washington to get
Find
a
those.
U.S. Ukraine flag. But I'm making a statement, yes. And what better place to make it than right here?
What's the statement?
The statement is that there are good guys and bad guys in this war, and the Russians are the bad guys. They invaded, contrary to almost every international law, and they should be defeated. And Ukraine is entitled to the promises that the world made to them decades ago.
Well, I want to ask you precisely.
I know that sounds quaint, but that's still my view. It's been my view for 3 years. Actually, since the middle of the last decade.
Well, I want to follow up on that and just start with a big picture question that I think a lot of our friends in the room and certainly on the live stream have in mind, which is, can Europe still count on the U.S. to help guarantee its security in the years ahead?
I think so. I think so.
You think so?
I mean, yes. You know, your last conversation quoted President Trump as saying something very strong, that to the extent that Russia should fall in line. 2 days ago, he might have said something a little confusing in that regard. So one of the things about Donald Trump is he keeps people on their toes and keeps us guessing. Yes, but I think in the United States, we view NATO as important. We've had 7 decades or more since my dad was over here fighting for the United States, and Britain, France, Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium. So, and we've had relative stability. There is one guy who is sentimental about the USSR, and he's running Russia right now, and he covets not only Ukraine but Moldova. Everyone knows that, and he's got his eyes on Romania. And Armenia, and if I were Azerbaijan, I wouldn't feel too comfortable about this little flirtation that they've had with Putin recently. And of course, Georgia is part of Georgia is now being occupied. This is a guy who's a war criminal. He's a brutal dictator, and the G8 was correct to kick him out, and Europe is correct to treat him like the war criminal he is.
Should he come back into the G8?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't hear anybody in Europe saying that.
We heard somebody yesterday in Washington say it.
I did hear that. Yeah, right.
Have you tried talking to President Trump about what Putin's actually about?
No.
Why not?
Okay. I don't get that much time. I'm not down at Mar-a-Lago a lot. But my goal...
Improve your golf game, Senator.
My golf...
Get some more time
My
there.
golf game ended about 50 years ago.
That's the problem.
I made the high school team. It got me out of class one afternoon.
But in all seriousness,
look, here's what I talk to Donald Trump about, and this is this is why I ran for re-election. Yeah. This is why I'm delighted to be chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and why I'm glad we've got a trifecta with Republicans in charge of the administration, the House, and the Senate. The United States is not where it needs to be in terms of military strength. We are where we were at the beginning of the Reagan administration, and we have a chance under this parliamentary procedure called reconciliation, where you don't have to get a supermajority in the Senate. We have a chance to do as Reagan did and leave the next generation with a stronger America, America that can once again be assured of peace through strength.
Is this Roger?
And that's why I've got two plans. Yeah. One that I introduced last year. We didn't know who was going to be winning the election, and then one basically to say we can become more modern. Yeah. We can embrace innovation like the private sector has, like small business.
I want to ask you about more money on defense and about your project.
Okay, well that's why I'm in office. That's why I'm here today. So sure.
I want to ask you about that.
But
is this Roger Wicker's personal politics and sense of, look, my focus on doing 6 more years in the U.S. Senate is trying to get us back to a Reaganite place on defense spending and a defense posture, and that means picking my battles. And that means that if I want to get that done, then I can't go to President Trump and say Putin's a bad guy and here's why.
Well,
or can you do both?
Well, I hope so, but yes, I can't be in every skirmish. Yes. I guess you've noticed that, yeah.
But
so I have a goal. It's a worthy goal. It will be all-consuming. Yeah. And it's not going to be easy. We only have a 2-vote margin in the House and 3-vote margin in the Senate, and time and chance happens to everybody. So we need to move.
But this is
to get it done.
A skirmish that I think you do have some interest in. Yesterday in the Capitol, you said, quote, "I'd prefer we didn't give away negotiating positions before we actually get started," talking about the end of the Russia-Ukraine war.
I was one of about 30 people that said that to reporters.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything that
but you do feel
strongly
strongly about
Thomas Jefferson.
But you do feel strongly about having a firm posture with the Russians and not saying preemptively, Ukraine's never going to be in NATO. We're never going back to the 2014 lines.
Well, and the Secretary walked that part back, the NATO part.
You were encouraged by that?
I was heartened by that, yes, indeed.
You spent a lot of capital getting him confirmed.
I surely did, yes.
And then for him to come out and say what he did a couple of days ago, couldn't have made you very happy.
Well, it was a surprise.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing, like there was in the Reagan administration, when Reagan kept putting the evil empire into his speeches,
and they take it out.
The State Department speechwriters kept taking it out, and he kept putting Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall, and it kept coming out, and finally he said, well, I guess I'm the one who got elected president, and so I'm going to say, tear down this wall, and the wall came down. But also, we've had stable borders.
Yeah.
Really, since the Soviet Union fell, and we have felt like we had gotten beyond that.
Right.
If you want to invade your neighbor, you can always think of a reason. And Vladimir Putin is just as clever as Hitler was.
Yeah.
Hitler didn't want to invade anybody, he said. He just was so concerned about those German speakers over in the Sudetenland. And I mean, it is absolutely out of Hitler's playbook, and anybody that reads history should know that.
So they should not be in the G8.
No.
Should Ukraine have a chance to be in NATO someday?
I wouldn't rule it out, but
President Trump said
in
Russia.
the meantime, in the meantime, though, it may not happen in 5 years or this year or 5 years or 10 years. But in the meantime, can't peace-loving, strong allies of the United States in Europe join together somehow and say, yes, we will defend after this treaty is written and agreed to. We will defend someone who's a victim of aggression. We ought to be able to say that. It doesn't have to be NATO. It could be
some other kind of guarantee of security.
10 or whatever.
President Trump said yesterday that a country in Russia's position could not allow Ukraine to join NATO. Should Russia have a veto on who is and is not in Ukraine, do you think?
Of course not.
Okay. So Roger Wicker does not want Russia back in the G8. He does not want to have Russia holding a veto over who is or is not in NATO. I assume Roger Wicker would not want to have a state visit of Vladimir Putin to the U.S. either?
I would not. I wouldn't feel good about that.
Don't bring him to Mississippi.
I would not feel good about that.
Yeah, okay. All right. What is your perspective on process and substance?
Yeah, but let me make this point, Bill and Nate. NATO is not an aggressive force against Russia. That is totally Soviet-style propaganda. And for anyone to believe that, anyone on talk shows or anyone on European media to say that is absolutely just out of touch.
I have to say
reality.
this. I have to say it. President Trump said this week that Russia invaded Ukraine because of NATO enlargement.
Well, that's. I think the president was perhaps saying that's one of the pretexts that Putin used.
Okay.
Putin. Listen, Putin. It isn't just sort of somebody going off the rail. Putin is a war criminal. He needs to be in prison for the rest of his life. And there's no sense in treating him like he is that he's eligible to sit in the councils of Europe along with elected people who are subject to a vote of constituents every now and then. He is a war criminal. Yeah. And read the Wall Street Journal front page article from 2 or 3 days ago. He has made it clear to the people running his prisons that prisoners of war from Ukraine should be tortured. They should be made miserable.
You alluded to that
in
a blistering floor speech on Tuesday in the Senate.
You know, all I did, basically all I did was read from the quotes of these Russian prison guards who said, I can't do this. Yeah. I got to find a way to defect to the West. Yeah. I was basically reading their words.
It was a shocking.
He deserves to be blistered.
It was a shocking report. I thought your remarks were very powerful, and you said, quote, this is the regime that some people are hoping we can somehow negotiate with in good faith and depend on to keep up their end of the bargain. You sound pretty darn skeptical there that Russia is going to abide by any agreement.
Well, they didn't. They haven't kept their end of the bargain when the Soviet Union fell apart, and we were trying. The international community was trying to talk the leadership of Ukraine at that time to give up a nuclear weapon, which they did based on a solemn promise by the United States of America.
The famous, speaking of that period, the famous Ronald Reagan dictum was trust but verify. If Donald Trump was sitting here right now, what would be the version of trust but verify that you would convey to him when it comes to Russia?
What I tell Donald Trump is he can be the Ronald Reagan of our age. During the 8 years of Ronald Reagan and 4 H.W. Bush, we had relative peace. We went from well under 300 ships in our Navy to 599 because the leader of the free world and the commander-in-chief of the United States military was determined to do it, and he got much of it done through a bipartisan Congress. And honestly, I'm on a couple of planes full of Republicans and Democrats who've come over here, and we have strong support for the kind of strength that can persuade a Xi Jinping,
Right.
and whoever ends up being the next Ayatollah in Iran and North Korea, and Vladimir Putin, the brutal dictator, to stand down and realize that the consequences for them and for their people of any aggression towards us and NATO and our allies and the free people of this world would be unthinkable.
Take us in.
That is what Ronald Reagan and H.W. Bush accomplished.
Take us into that conversation last night on the plane, because you're flying over here at obviously a very, very fraught time. The continent is deeply concerned about being cut out of any negotiations to end the war. Is there going to be a bipartisan consensus that comes out of Munich here, do you think, from the U.S. delegation about how to end this war in terms of process and substance?
Well, we're here to listen and to have an exchange of views. I don't know that we come out of the Munich Security Council meetings annually with a bipartisan agreement. Right. But we come out with a better understanding, and people all over the world are able to hear what leaders of the National Security and Foreign Affairs Committees, both houses and both parties, feel.
Let me ask you directly, what's your perspective on how this war should end, both in terms of the process and the substance of
how it should have ended?
Yeah.
How it should have ended.
Well, no, now, how should it end?
2.5 years ago,
right.
The West, including the United States and Canada, should have given Ukraine everything they asked for and let them win. And I will tell you, Russia is taking 40,000 casualties a month. I don't know how long they can stand that. So this idea that somehow Ukraine is barely hanging on against the superpower is not exactly correct. So
we shouldn't rush toward any kind of negotiated peace, you don't think?
I think it would be wonderful if the killing and the fighting would stop. It would have been wonderful if the killing and fighting in World War II could have stopped 2 or 3 years earlier. Regrettably, it didn't. But the Allies at that point were more interested in victory and making sure that this kind of totalitarianism didn't take over Europe.
Why is it different today?
So I've been frustrated. I was frustrated with the Biden administration.
I know you were.
And
you are now.
I went to the White House any number of times. I was on the phone with Jake Sullivan on a bipartisan basis. I sat in the SCIF, our
secure
room, with Chuck Schumer and Democrats and Republicans begging Jake Sullivan to give the ATACMS to Zelensky and his troops. They were doing well, but don't make them go into battle, or don't keep them in battle with one hand tied behind their back. They are the victims of an unprecedented aggression that is going to continue. And I guarantee you, if Ukraine if they do happen to fall, this fledgling post-Soviet Georgia is next, unless maybe it's Moldova that's next. This doesn't stop, and this is why Finland and Sweden joined NATO.
So you prefer to keep supplying Ukraine with military aid rather than move to a negotiated peace?
Thank you for letting me clarify that. I'm absolutely comfortable with talks being held.
Okay.
But not just any deal. not just any deal to stop the fighting. And I'll tell you, I wouldn't make any permanent decision on national boundaries. We might freeze them where they are now. I don't think we've made a permanent decision with North Korea on boundaries. It's temporary. It's been there for 70 years or 60 years. But I wouldn't concede anything permanently. But if we can stop the fighting and have a several-year period where where things stay in place, and maybe some procedure to let actually these 21st century human beings make the same decision that you and I get to make about who runs their life and runs their country. That might be a start. But you look, everybody knows, and you know,
yeah.
and people in the administration know, you don't say before your first meeting what you will agree to and what you won't agree to.
Yeah, I was puzzled by that too.
Yeah, well, I was puzzled too, and I was disturbed. I was disturbed by it.
Tell me, going forward, you were emphatic last fall with the Biden administration, publicly and privately, about the urgency of getting more weapons and lessening the restrictions on the weapons that the Ukrainians could use. Do you still have that same view, that it's urgent that we keep supplying the Ukrainians with that kind of aid?
Yes, until there's a ceasefire. They're the good guys
Yeah.
that are being invaded
Yeah.
by a bigger, stronger neighbor because they think they can.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, the United States is in danger of getting a reputation.
Right.
Solemnly promise the Afghans,
Yeah.
we're going to have your back.
Right.
And so there's a generation of little girls that got to go to school. Now there are no little girls in school anymore.
And the same thing could happen in Ukraine too. You worry?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. When we give our word, we ought to keep it. And this is, democracy is wonderful, but there's some disadvantages, and that's you have an election every 4 years, and we're with our Congress every 2 years, and people with different viewpoints get elected. But
some of them, even in your own party, it turns out.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. but we should have a foreign policy that is consistent enough that when the United States makes a solemn promise, along with the West,
right,
that we keep that promise.
Let's talk about the reason that you ran for 6 more years. And by the way, is this going to be your final term, do you think, in the Senate?
No. I just took the oath of office 6 weeks ago.
I know you have a lot of grandkids. You get a lot of grandkids.
I look that old, goodness.
All right.
And by the way, I thought I was
Gail,
coming.
I tried to ask him, Mrs. Wicker. I tried.
I thought I was coming over to meet you in a pub.
Yeah.
And have a conversation.
The drinks are in the back here. It's a little early in the morning.
Cameras
for the hard stuff.
I started to do it about face and walk right out.
You wouldn't do that to me, Senator.
Who are all these people?
I know it. These are the folks who are eager to talk to you afterwards about keeping aid flowing to Ukraine, I'm sure. Let's talk about your recent conversation with President Trump and the reason that you ran for 6 more years and what you feel so strongly about.
I had a real good conversation with President Trump about
defense.
What we'll do for 21st century peace through strength.
Yeah.
And my proposal to make the Pentagon more modern, like Tesla is, and like SpaceX and Blue Origin and things like that. I mean, it's just for somebody who doesn't have the shackles of the bureaucracy and the stultified rules in the Pentagon. It's just a lot easier to get something done. We are way too slow on new things. Way too many people have to bless it, and we can do better.
This is one of the things that unifies your party. all factions of the party, which is plussing up defense spending, right? I mean, almost everybody on your side,
I'd say you've got a good 90-10 on that.
yeah.
Yeah.
No matter the view about NATO or Ukraine, there's a sort of consensus in the GOP. We got to spend more on defense, right? So,
Well, you know, there are people in the caucus
named
who
Rand Paul.
understand that defense is national preservation and security.
Yes.
There are others who say, well, you know, unless we cut the debt,
Right.
we'll all be bankrupt and it won't matter. I think unless we protect,
But President Trump's
our
on
shores and our interests, there's no, the debt's going to be twice as.
So what's your vision? 6 more.
We had a good conversation
Yeah, tell us.
with Donald Trump
Yep.
about. I had a good conversation with Donald, and it was just the president and I, and Susie and 2 staffers.
The White House?
Yes, in the Oval Office, and he was very engaged. And missile defense, which we're calling Iron Dome for America. It's not mechanically the same thing as Israel has, because Israel's the size of New Jersey, and we're a vast continent. But you know, ships, submarines. We talked about the next generation of fighter jet, which we call NGAD, hasn't even been named yet, and how we can do that. And I will tell you that this is super news for someone like me and like people in the administration. Donald Trump absolutely is going to help us get, I'd say, 150 billion or down to 100 billion, somewhere in that range, in the reconciliation bill, and he's going to go to the mat for these expenditures, just like he's gone to the mat for all these appointments that he's made. He is going to be very engaged in that, and I have a little group of House members and former House members I meet with most weeks.
Shelter and marching.
And they say that the president is very engaged in getting this done.
You're a House guy yourself, even though you're a senator now. You wouldn't ever want to admit that, but I used to be in the House, right?
I very much enjoy being in the House.
30 years.
I was dumbfounded and distressed when Trent Lott called me one Sunday after Thanksgiving in 2007 and said he was resigning.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to make of that.
Because you came to the House in '94, so you're a 30-year veteran of Congress now.
But there's nothing wrong with that. Experience helps.
And your vision going forward, though, is really that it's imperative that the U.S. plus up its defense spending, especially when it comes to the NATO.
Well, yeah,
right?
particularly when you see that Russia and China are working together like they never have before. Yeah. And so who's sending troops to fight in Ukraine? North Korea.
Right. And
who's helping to send funds? It's Iran. And so, you know, they are an axis of aggression like they never have been before.
And therefore imperative for the U.S. to spend more on our own defense, you're saying?
Yes, and spend it effectively. Let's don't say it's imperative that we spend more. It's imperative that we buy more and produce more and manufacture more.
Have you had a conversation?
So that we can avoid a war. Xi Jinping went to his Congress, invited the international press there. Everybody could see it. It was a public meeting, and he says, "I want to be ready. I want you, the Congress of the People's Republic of China, to help us be ready to retake Taiwan by the year 2027."
When you talk,
we're now in our second month of 2025.
To President Trump, he was on board with more spending on defense. Did this DOGE come up that Elon Musk is running, which is trying to find cuts in government spending?
Well, it didn't come up, but I'll tell you, I'm delighted. I really am. And people ask me if I'm comfortable with DOGE coming into the Pentagon.
I was about to.
Yes, and clearly we've got some confidential stuff, some very important national security secrets that have to be protected, unlike maybe the Transportation Department or.
Does that give you some pause, though? The fact.
Well, we have to be careful. The president's commander in chief, and he knows that.
Yeah.
And surely Elon Musk does. But to the extent that this DOGE operation is uncovering wasteful spending that nobody can justify, it is it's helpful.
But how do you
and it's popular with the people. I mean, Donald Trump gets a much higher approval on that than he got in the election.
Is it still going to be popular with you if he comes over to the Pentagon and just starts cutting funding willy-nilly?
Well, I don't think he'll do that.
Why are you confident he won't?
Well, the spending that he has advocated cutting so far has seemed wasteful. Now, and I made this statement after the USAID, but after he began taking over USAID, I've always thought it's important for us to combat the China Belt and Road Initiative.
Which was what USAID was doing, right?
Yes, but apparently not very effectively. I mean, to spend one penny of your taxpayer money on transgender operas in strict Islamic countries is an absolute waste of money. It's absurd, and apparently there was a lot of that.
But do you have to gut the entire organization?
Well, I don't.
A handful of programs?
I hope that doesn't happen.
They took the name off the building. It already has, hasn't it?
Well, okay. Well, I think it's if it's moved to the State Department, that will be okay.
Okay.
If the Education Department is moved back under HEW, that would be okay. I mean, nobody can argue that education, that primary and secondary education in the United States is better than it was 50 years ago, when or 40 years ago, whenever the department was created. Nobody could say it's better now.
Right.
It's worse. So I wouldn't mind consolidating that.
Right. Let's wrap where we.
Oh, let's wrap.
Began.
I think
we're
out
fun.
of time.
I know. You're finally noticing.
Turn that TV off.
You're finally noticing. What's your message for Europe? They're obviously very nervous right now about a new president in the U.S., about a sort of a negotiated end to Ukraine that they may not have a great say in.
Well, they may be upset that someone is suggesting that, but everyone knows that Europe and NATO and the people represented at this conference are going to have very much of a hand in what happens.
You can assure them that.
Yes, everyone knows that. There's just no question that we're going to depend on one of our strongest alliances. So, yeah, look, I was here at this conference during the first Trump administration, and I heard the concerns and the bewilderment of some of our allies. This is we've got a guy who likes to be provocative and who's getting things done, sometimes in a way that's not considered genteel by Western standards.
But your message is that there's still folks in the U.S., still folks in the Republican Party who view Russia for what they are.
Yes, and I hope that we are on the ascendancy rather than the other way around.
Well, I think Roger Wicker will have a say in trying to make that a reality. Senator, good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.